At 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the front door. Eliana froze. The sound went through her body like an electric shock. Her heart leapt, her palms dampened. For a few seconds she could not move. The knock came again, gentler this time. She made her way slowly downstairs, one hand on the wall. Through the frosted glass, she saw a tall figure standing beneath the porch. Not Sebastian. She opened the door only a little. Julian Hart stood on the step with a paper bag in one hand and an expression of such careful concern that she almost closed the door again. "Eliana," he said softly. "Julian." His hair was more grey than the last time she had seen him. There were lines at the corners of his eyes. He looked older, of course. They both were. But the shape of him was achingly familiar. The same steady shoulders, the same smouldering eyes, the same way of standing slightly back from a door, as though he would never presume entry. "I saw the lights on," he said. "Then Mrs. Ashford rang me at 8 to say your parents' porch light had been on all night, and should she be worried, I told her I'd check." Despite everything, Eliana almost smiled. "Mrs. Ashford is still alive?" "Very much so, and still gathering intelligence for the nation." The smile came properly then, brief but real. Julian saw it. He did not mention it. "I brought bread," he said, lifting the bag slightly, "and milk, eggs, bananas. I didn't know what you needed." The word bananas made her stomach turn. She tried not to show it. "Thank you. Can I put them in the kitchen?" She hesitated. He noticed that too. "I can leave them here." "No, it's all right." She opened the door wider and stepped back. Julian entered slowly, as if the house were a church or a hospital room. He placed the bag on the kitchen counter without unpacking it. Then he turned. "You don't have to explain anything." The sentence was so unexpected that Eliana gripped the edge of the table. "What? You don't have to explain why you're here or why you look He stopped himself. "Awful?" "I was going to say tired." "That was kind. I can be kind and honest. You look tired." She leaned against the counter. "I am tired." "Then I won't stay." He moved towards the hall. Something in her panicked at the thought of him leaving, not because she wanted company exactly, company was too demanding, but because his presence had not required anything from her. "Julian?" He turned. "Would you mind?" She swallowed. "Would you mind just sitting for a minute?" His face softened. "Of course." They sat in the kitchen at the old pine table where Eliana had once done homework, iced birthday cakes, argued with her father about university, and cried over Julian Hart when she was 22, and believed life had ended because love had gone wrong. Now she sat opposite him at 50, trembling in a cardigan, unable to trust a banana. Life, she thought, had a strange imagination. Julian did not ask questions. He looked around the kitchen and said, "Your mother would be furious about that plant." Eliana followed his gaze to the windowsill. A drooping basil plant leaned towards the glass, half dead and accusing. "She always said herbs had feelings. She once told me my parsley was depressed." She was probably right. She was. They sat quietly. The silence was not awkward. After a while, Julian said, "Hannah will be glad you're here." "How is she?" 15, clever, opinionated, dramatic about algebra, kind to animals, suspicious of most adults, so, all in all, doing well. Eliana smiled faintly. And Biscuit? Ancient, rude, convinced he is in charge of the house. He probably is, undoubtedly. Another silence. Then Julian looked at her properly, not clinically, not hungrily for details, just with human concern. "Are you safe here?" The question was different from Sebastian's questions. Sebastian asked as a doctor, "Are you safe?" Meaning, are you a risk? Are you stable? Do I need to intervene? Julian asked, as a neighbor, "Are you safe?" Meaning, is there enough heat, enough food, enough help, enough kindness nearby? Eliana's eyes filled. "I don't know." He nodded, as if that were a complete and acceptable answer. "I'm next door," he said. "Hannah is next door. Dad is next door, though he may forget why he came if you sent him for anything. But we are there." "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." "You don't know that yet." He smiled a little. "Fair point, but you're still not." She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Julian saw. Again, he did not mention it. "I'll write my number down," he said. "Text if you need anything. No need to call if talking is too much." The tenderness of that nearly broke her. Talking was too much. Explaining was too much. Being asked what was wrong was too much. Being told what was wrong was worse. He wrote his number on the back of an old envelope from the counter and placed it beside her. Then he stood. "I'll go now, but I'll leave the shopping here. If there's anything you can't eat, put it outside the back door and I'll collect it. No explanations required." Eliana looked up. No explanations required. Perhaps that was how healing began. Not with answers, not with certainty, but with one person removing the demand to justify your suffering. "Thank you," she said. Julian nodded. At the door, he paused. "Eliana?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry about your parents." She had heard those words many times, from relatives, neighbors, former colleagues, people in black coats at the funeral who smelled of rain and perfume and polite sorrow. But from Julian, standing in her parents' hall, they reached a place the others had not. "Thank you," she whispered. After he left, Eliana stood by the front window and watched him cross the narrow strip of garden between the two houses. He did not look back. She was grateful for that. Looking back would have made it something else too soon. At midday, there was another gentle interruption. Not a knock. A voice. Through the letterbox. "Dad says I'm not supposed to startle you. It's Hannah. I'm leaving something on the step. You don't have to open the door." Eliana stared at the door. A pause. "Also, Biscuit says hello, but he's not allowed over because he weed on your mom's lavender once, and Dad says we don't mention it." Despite the burning in her skin, despite the nausea, despite the ghostly feeling that she was separated from the world by glass, Eliana laughed. It was not much, but it was sound, her own sound. When she opened the door a minute later, the step was empty except for a small cardboard box. Inside was a packet of non-caffeinated tea, a small pack of cookies, and a folded note written in purple ink. Dear Eliana, Dad said not to overwhelm you, so I am not coming in. I hope the tea and cookies are okay for you. Biscuit wanted to contribute a sock, but I said no. Love, Hannah. Underneath, in smaller writing, P.S. You don't have to reply. Eliana stood in the doorway, holding the note to her chest. You don't have to reply. No explanations required. Take your time. These were small sentences, ordinary sentences. But after months of defending herself, they felt like cushions placed beneath a falling body. That evening, Julian texted, "No need to answer. Just checking the heating is working." Eliana looked at the message for a long time. Then she typed, "It is. Thank you." His reply came a minute later. "Good. We're here." There was no, "What happened? Has Sebastian called? Are you sure this is wise? Do you need help?" Just, "We're here." The night was still brutal. Her body did not care that she had changed houses. At 9 o'clock, the dread rose. At 11, the shaking worsened. At 1, she paced the hallway because lying down felt impossible. At 3, she sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the radiator, whispering, "This will pass," though she did not believe it. At 4, she nearly called Sebastian. Not because she wanted him, because fear remembered old numbers. Her thumb hovered over his name. Then she saw Julian's number written on the envelope beside the phone. She did not want to wake him. She did not want to be dramatic. She did not want to become the kind of person who needed neighbors in the middle of the night. Then a wave of terror rose through her so violently that her vision narrowed. She texted one word, "Awake?" The reply came less than a minute later. "Yes." Then, "Do you want company, practical help, distraction, or silence nearby?" Eliana stared at the words. She had never been offered categories of care before. She typed, "Silence nearby." 5 minutes later, there was a soft sound at the front door. Not a knock, a presence. She opened it. Julian stood on the step in a coat over pyjamas, hair flattened on one side, holding a flask. "I made tea," he whispered. "No need to drink it." She stepped aside. He entered without turning on lights. In the sitting room, he placed the flask on the table and sat in the chair nearest the door, leaving the sofa to her. For a while, they said nothing. Eliana sat curled beneath the blanket, shaking. Julian sat with his hands loosely clasped, looking not at her, but at the dark window, as though guarding the room from demanding too much. After perhaps 20 minutes, she said, "You don't have to stay. I know. I might be like this for hours." "All right. You have work?" "I do." "Then you should sleep." "I probably should." She looked at him. He looked back, calm and faintly amused. She almost smiled. "I'm not good company," she said. "I wasn't promised entertainment." The smile came, small but unmistakable. Then the trembling surged again, and the smile vanished. She pressed a hand to her chest. "It feels like my body is trying to escape itself." Julian nodded slowly. That sounds terrifying. She waited for more. None came. There was no correction, no breathing instruction. No, but your oxygen is fine. No, try not to focus on it. Just, that sounds terrifying. Her eyes filled. I don't know how to do this. No, I don't know if I'm going to get better. No, I'm scared I've lost myself. Julian looked at her then. You're still here. She shook her head. You don't know that. I know enough. How? Because you laughed at Hannah's note. A tear slipped down her face. That doesn't mean anything. It means something. What? It means something in you can still reach the surface. She looked away. The room was dim, grey at the edges with approaching dawn. The stopped clock on the mantelpiece still stood at 4:15, but outside the window the sky was beginning to pale. Julian stayed until 6. Before he left, he poured non-caffeinated tea from the flask into a mug and set it on the table. No need to drink it, he said again. At the door, he paused. Would it help if Hannah came by after school? Just for 10 minutes. She can bring biscuit, but only if you want. Eliana was so tired she could barely think. Still, the image of the old terrier trotting into the house, bold and inappropriate, and very much alive, stirred something gentle in her. Yes, she said. Maybe is enough. After he left, Eliana lay back on the sofa. Her body still burned, her heart still raced, her mind still flickered with frightening thoughts. She was not healed. She was not even better. But something in the room had changed. Or perhaps something in her had. For months, suffering had been a courtroom, every symptom placed on trial, every sensation cross-examined, every fear treated as unreliable testimony. Here in the house where she had once been a girl, with the neighbour who had once loved her sitting quietly through the dark, suffering was no longer a case she had to prove. It was simply witnessed, and for the first time, since the pill had changed everything, Eliana wondered whether being believed might not cure the body, but it might give the soul somewhere to rest while the body fought its way back. Across town, Sebastian woke in an empty bed. For several seconds, before memory returned, he reached towards her side. His hand met cold sheets. The room was pale with morning. Eliana's bedside table was bare, except for the wedding photograph, lying face down. He picked up his phone. No new message. He typed, "How are you this morning?" Then deleted it. He typed, "I'm worried about you." Deleted that too. Finally, he wrote, "Please let me know if you need anything." He stared at the words, then pressed send. The reply did not come. In another house, on another street, Eliana slept for 23 minutes. It was not much, but it was sleep. And when she woke, there was sunlight at the edge of the curtains, tea cooling on the table, and Hannah's purple note beside her hand. "You don't have to reply." Eliana touched the paper lightly. Then, for the first time in many weeks, she whispered something that sounded almost like a prayer. "Let me come back." Healing did not announce itself. There was no morning when Eliana woke and thought, "It's over." She didn't have a sudden improvement in symptoms. There was no dramatic return of sleep. There was no clean line between the woman who had been ill and the woman who would one day live again. There were only small things, so small that at first she almost missed them. The first was the robin. It appeared on the garden fence, round-bellied and bright-eyed, hopping along the wet wood as though inspecting the neglected borders on behalf of her mother. Eliana was sitting by the sitting-room window wrapped in a blanket. The day had been hard. Her skin burned. Her head felt full of pressure. The dizziness, the pressure, she felt too ill to move. The world seemed too sharp and too far away at the same time. But the robin appeared, tilted its head, and looked directly at her. For one strange second, Eliana felt seen by something that expected nothing. When Julian texted later to ask whether she needed anything from the shops, she typed, "There was a robin in the garden." She stared at the message, embarrassed by its smallness. Then she sent it. His reply came a minute later. "Your mother would say it was checking on you." Eliana pressed the phone lightly to her chest. Yes, she would. The second small thing was soup. Not eating a full bowl, not enjoying it, not feeling normal afterwards. Just soup. Julian made it on a Tuesday and left it outside the back door in a flask with a note attached. Very plain. Carrot, potato, a little salt. No onions, no mystery ingredients. No need to eat it. No offense taken if you pour it into the garden, though Dad says the garden has suffered enough. Eliana smiled at the note. She poured 3 spoonsfuls into a mug and sat with it for 20 minutes before tasting it. Her hands shook. Her stomach tightened in anticipation. She waited for heat, panic, burning, danger. Nothing happened immediately. She took another spoonful, then another. By the end, she had managed half a mug. She texted Julian. "I had some." He replied, "That is not small." She read the sentence several times. Then she wrote it on the back of Hannah's purple note. "That is not small." After that, the small things began to gather. Hannah came by after school sometimes, always announcing herself before knocking, always leaving room for Eliana to say no. She brought homework, gossip, dramatic complaints about algebra, and Biscuit, who seemed to believe that illness had been invented to provide him with additional blankets. Biscuit became a kind of medicine no one prescribed. He did not ask questions. He did not monitor symptoms. He did not say, "But you seemed better yesterday." He simply came in, turned around 3 times, settled himself near Eliana's feet, and slept with the full confidence of a creature who trusted the world to continue. On the bad days, when her heart surged and her thoughts flickered with terror, the dog's small warm weight against her ankles was the only pulse check she needed. Life was still happening. Something soft was breathing. The room had not ended. One morning, after a particularly brutal night, Eliana opened the front door to find a pale blue notebook on the step. On top lay a note in Hannah's purple handwriting. "Dad says people always give journals to sad people, which is annoying, so this is not a journal, it is an evidence book. You only write things that prove you are still alive, even if they are tiny. Examples: Robin, soup, biscuit, stealing your blanket, me being hilarious. No pressure. You can also use it for shopping lists or throwing at Dad if he becomes irritating. Eliana smiled. She took the notebook inside and placed it on the kitchen table. For 2 days, she did not open it. On the 3rd day, she wrote, Robin, then underneath, soup, then biscuit stole my blanket, and I laughed. She stared at the 3 lines for a long time. They were not enough to build a life from, but perhaps they were enough to mark that life had not completely gone. Time became strange after that. Days stretched, weeks vanished. Seasons changed in ways Eliana noticed only through the window. Bare branches, then green buds, then heavy summer leaves, then the slow thinning of light. Healing moved in loops. It circled, it doubled back, it disappeared for long stretches, then returned in some tiny, almost insulting form. A laugh, a nap, a half slice of toast. A morning when the kettle sounded merely unpleasant instead of unbearable. A day when the light through the curtains did not feel like an assault. A night when sleep came for 47 minutes, then later for an hour, then one day for long enough that she woke startled by the fact of having been absent. The evidence book filled slowly, not neatly. Some pages held only one word, bad. Others carried small proofs. Sat by window for 10 minutes. Julian fixed kitchen window. Hannah came. Biscuit snored. Walked to front door. Caught a waft of baking bread from a neighbor's kitchen and remembered that ordinary life still existed. Remembered Mum without breaking. Still here. She learned not to trust improvement too quickly. A better morning could be followed by a terrible afternoon. A calm evening could collapse into a night of shaking and fear. There were days when she wondered whether she had imagined every sign of progress. Days when the thought rose, sharp and cruel. What if Sebastian was right? On those days, she opened the blue notebook. The entries did not stop the terror, but they argued softly against its certainty. Julian did reassure her, often, but he did not use reassurance as a way to end the conversation or silence her fear. Quietly, in the hours when she slept, or tried to, he read. He read about prescribed medication injury, nervous system sensitization, tapering, waves, windows, and the long, uneven ways people recovered. He did not turn himself into an expert. He did not arrive with theories or protocols, but he learnt enough to stop being afraid of her fear. So when Eliana said, "What if my body has forgotten how to heal?" he did not tell her she was being irrational. He simply said, "I don't believe your body has given up on you. I think it is fighting very hard to find its way back. And until you can believe that for yourself, I can help hold the thought for you." He never said it as a verdict, never as pressure, never as proof that tomorrow had to be better than today. He said it the way someone might keep a lamp lit in a window, not to force the traveller home, but to remind them there was still a home to come back to. If she could not speak, he texted. If she could not answer, He did not require an answer. If she could not eat, he left food without comment. If she shook while holding a mug, he did not reach for a pulse oximeter. He simply reached for her hand and steadied the ceramic until the tremor passed. No explanation, no clinical name for the pain, just the warmth of his palm and the shared understanding that some things take as long as they take.